Brooks Koepka's PGA Tour comeback was already in danger. He was outside the FedExCup Playoffs, running out of tournaments and preparing for one final push in Detroit. But before he hit a single shot, his name suddenly disappeared from the Rocket Classic field, and that decision could bring his season to an abrupt end. Koepka had been scheduled to compete at Detroit Golf Club, where the Rocket Classic represented one of his final chances to collect desperately needed FedEx Cup points. Then on Tuesday, only days before the opening round, he withdrew. Ben Silverman replaced him in the field, but Koepka had just surrendered an opportunity he may not get back. Reuters initially reported that no reason had been provided. Golf Monthly later reported that Koepka had withdrawn for personal reasons. Nothing more specific has been confirmed, and those circumstances should remain private. But while the explanation is unknown, the competitive consequences are impossible to hide. Detroit was not just another tournament on Koepka's schedule, it was the second-to-last event of the PGA Tour regular season. For a player already safely inside the top 70, missing 1 week might be manageable. Koepka had no such protection, and that is where this withdrawal becomes dangerous. He entered the week outside the FedExCup playoff positions, with almost no margin remaining. Every player ahead of him still had the chance to earn points in Detroit, while Koepka could only watch his position become more difficult. He was not simply losing a tournament, he was losing ground without even stepping onto the course. By withdrawing, Koepka gave up 4 possible rounds, 1 possible high finish, and 1 of only 2 remaining chances to rescue his postseason. The pressure that could have been spread across Detroit and the Wyndham Championship is now concentrated into one final week. One tournament suddenly carries the weight of his entire comeback. That is what makes the timing so damaging. Koepka did not withdraw early in the season when months remained to recover. He withdrew with the regular season almost over while the players around the cutoff continued moving ahead of him. And those players are not going to wait for him. The withdrawal was surprising, but the real damage becomes clear when you look at the number beside Koepka's name in the FedEx Cup standings. Here is Chapter 2, continuing directly from Chapter 1. The number beside Brooks Koepka's name was 84. That was his position in the FedEx Cup standings entering Rocket Classic Week, 14 places outside the top 70. And with only those top 70 players advancing to the FedEx St. Jude Championship, Koepka was already chasing the season before he withdrew. 14 positions may not sound impossible, but the standings do not move in isolation. Every player between Koepka and the cutoff is fighting for the same limited places. When one of them finishes well, the target moves farther away. Koepka is not chasing one number. He is chasing an entire group that refuses to stand still. By missing Detroit, he gave up a full tournament's worth of possible points. A top 10 finish could have moved him closer. A victory could have transformed his season completely. Instead, Koepka collected nothing while the players around him had 4 rounds to improve their positions. That is how a difficult task became a desperate one. The Wyndham Championship is now his final regular season opportunity. There is no second tournament waiting behind it and no chance to repair a slow start later. Koepka must arrive ready to perform immediately because even one poor round could push him toward the wrong side of the cut, and the pressure starts with his very first tee shot. Simply making the weekend may not be enough. An average finish would likely leave Koepka outside the playoffs, especially if players near 71st also earn points. He probably needs to finish high on the leaderboard and then hope the results around him fall the right way. Even his best golf may require help. The possibilities are brutally simple. A strong Wyndham performance could lift him into the top 70. An average week probably ends his playoff hopes. A missed cut or another withdrawal would almost certainly finish the campaign immediately, and if the bubble players perform well, the result Koepka needs becomes even more demanding. That is why Wyndham has become a virtual winner-go-home event. Koepka does not necessarily need to win the tournament, but he must play like a man with no tomorrow. Every birdie could extend his comeback. Every mistake could bring it closer to an early ending. Koepka still has one chance, but his position would not be this desperate if his return to the PGA Tour had gone according to plan. Koepka still has one chance, but his position would not be this desperate if his return to the PGA Tour had gone according to plan. He came back as a 5-time major champion, one of the most recognizable names in golf, and a player expected to compete immediately. But the results never matched the reputation. This was Koepka's first full season back after competing with LIV Golf from 2022 through 2025. The expectations were enormous because this was not an unknown player trying to rebuild his career. This was Brooks Koepka, a man who had spent years proving that pressure usually brought out his best. This season did the opposite. Through 15 PGA Tour starts, Koepka had recorded only one top 10 finish. That result came at the Cognizant Classic on March 1st, where he finished tied for 9th. It looked like the beginning of something better, but the breakthrough never arrived. One encouraging week was followed by more missed opportunities. Koepka made 10 cuts in those 15 appearances, which means he was not playing terribly every week. The problem was what happened after he reached the weekend. He was making enough cuts to remain involved, but not producing enough high finishes to collect the points required for safety. Consistency without contention left him trapped. There were brief signs that his game was improving. Certain rounds looked sharper and certain tournaments suggested a bigger result might be coming. But every time Koepka appeared ready to build momentum, the season moved forward without him. The major finish that could transform his ranking simply never appeared. His year also included another worrying moment at the RBC Canadian Open in June. Koepka withdrew before the final round after struggling to grip the club because of an issue affecting his left hand. There is no confirmed connection between that problem and his Rocket Classic withdrawal, but it added another interruption to an already unstable season. That is why Detroit mattered so much. Koepka's earlier results had left him with no cushion and almost no time. The Rocket Classic was supposed to be one of his final opportunities to produce the performance missing all year. Instead, he surrendered it before the opening round. Koepka returned as one of the biggest stars in the sport, but reputation does not earn FedExCup points. His entire postseason now depends on producing the result that has avoided him for months, and failing to qualify would cost far more than one tournament appearance. It would change the entire meaning of his first season back. Failing to qualify would cost Koepka far more than one tournament appearance. If he remains outside the top 70 after the Wyndham Championship, he will miss the FedEx St. Jude Championship, the opening event of the PGA Tour Playoffs. And once that door closes, every stage behind it disappears as well. There would be no path to the BMW Championship and no chance to reach the Tour Championship. Koepka's first season back on the PGA Tour would end without a single appearance in the postseason. For a five-time major champion returning with enormous expectations, that would be difficult to explain away. The disappointment would not come from one missed cut or one bad week. It would reflect an entire season in which Koepka never produced enough high finishes to secure his position. Questions about his consistency would grow louder. Concerns about his health would return, and people would begin asking whether his previous level is still within reach. To be clear, missing the playoffs would not necessarily mean Koepka is banned from competing for the remainder of 2026. FedExCup Fall events may still provide opportunities later in the calendar. But those tournaments are not the same as competing alongside the best players during the most important stretch of the PGA Tour season. While the leading names fight for the FedEx Cup, Koepka would be watching from outside. He would lose the television exposure, ranking opportunities, and competitive momentum that come with postseason golf. For a player trying to reestablish himself after returning from LIV, that absence would be impossible to ignore. It could also change the way Koepka approaches 2027. Instead of building from a successful comeback season, he would enter the offseason searching for answers. His schedule, preparation, health, and expectations would all need to be reconsidered. One missed postseason could shape everything that follows. That is why the Wyndham Championship can fairly be described as the event that may save or end Koepka's meaningful PGA Tour season. Later starts may remain possible, but the part of the year that matters most would be finished. And for someone who returned to contend, simply remaining active is not enough. Everything now comes down to 4 rounds in North Carolina, but even a strong performance may not guarantee that Koepka survives. Everything now comes down to 4 rounds in North Carolina, but even a strong performance may not guarantee that Koepka survives. The Wyndham Championship concludes the PGA Tour regular season on August 9th, and it represents his final opportunity to climb from 84th into the top 70. There is nowhere left to hide. Koepka must arrive prepared despite missing the Rocket Classic and whatever personal circumstances caused that withdrawal. Those details details remain private, and there is no reason to invent an explanation. The real drama is already visible in the standings, where one difficult week could end his playoff campaign immediately. His first objective is simple: make the cut. Koepka cannot chase the top 70 from home while the players around him continue collecting points. But surviving Friday will only keep the door open. To walk through it, he will almost certainly need to move much closer to the top of the leaderboard. A high finish could completely change the story of his comeback. One major performance would erase weeks of frustration, push him toward the FedExCup Playoffs, and remind everyone why Koepka has won 5 major championships. The player who struggled for momentum all season could suddenly become the name nobody wants to face. But an average week probably will not be enough. Finishing somewhere in the middle of the field may earn points, but Koepka also needs favorable movement around the cutoff. If the players sitting between him and 71st perform well, the target rises and his margin disappears again. A missed cut would settle everything before the weekend. Another withdrawal would end the postseason question even faster. Koepka is accustomed to entering tournaments with major trophies on the line, but this time he is fighting for something far more basic: the right to keep playing when the PGA Tour season matters most. His Detroit withdrawal does not automatically end his year, but it removed his second-to-last opportunity and turned Wyndham into one of the most important regular season events of his career. One great week could save his return. Anything less could send him home before the playoffs begin. So, do you think Brooks Koepka can climb from 84th into the top 70 at the Wyndham Championship, or has missing Detroit already made the gap too large? Let us know your prediction in the comments below.